All right. So this is some just sort of a image search for New York City 1980s. Just, beautiful aged vintage New York City. And again, this is really when I was going down to New York, this is what I saw. This was the scene and the vibe, the feel, the grittiness, the lividity. It was just everywhere. I'd go down just to look at the graffiti on the trains. And so, so I'm just kind of bringing these threads, kind of trying to entwine this a little bit, more of a like at home kind of arts background meets, getting a scholarship to study formal art in high school at a private school meets, growing up on hip hop and street culture and breakdancing and drawing pictures on my clothes to going to New York City and seeing this, explosion of culture everywhere all around you. And, some of it, vandalism and, could be seen as, uh, you know, not so great, but as a young person, as somebody who already was a little anti-authority and kind of wanting to make my own mark on the world, this is what I was looking up to, the lyrics and the music, the fashion expressions, the artistic expression, the, call it vandalism, but just sort of like etching your drawing, your name onto the wall, the cave. And property developers and real estate moguls and stuff can do it in their own right. They can build buildings, they can move earth, they can put things up, they can put highways through centers of cities, move mountains and put their legacy and put their names on it. And so for us common people, us everyday folk, when a lot of the socioeconomic conditions were this, people struggling to get by, people on green stamps. I remember my mother getting the welfare block of cheese and, us using these strange certificates to buy our food because we didn't have cash, and, and yet there's this underground culture, the punk scene, the skate scene, the BMX scene, the hip hop scene that was coming up that was like, well, all right, well, that's all good. We're going to do our thing. And so part of that narrative, if you know anything about the arts in this context, hip hop culture and so on and so forth, is that, you know, it wasn't because people just were bored and wanted to dance on the street or listen to music and find a cutie for the night. This was war. This was do or die. And so early era hip hop, early era New York City, Chicago, what have you, big city life was, and when I say early era, I mean in my own life, in the 80s, 70s, was survivalism in a way. And so, you know, the five chambers of hip hop, the graffiti, the fashion, the breakdance, and the DJing, the MCing, all of that was a way to convert all of this strife and all of this, energy pent up of living in the harsh streets, of not having jobs, of struggling to get by, and all of that. And this music and this culture came out of that and twisted it and made it in a way a peaceful, non-violent response, even though maybe the lyrics or the imagery or even just like defacing, things like this was like seen as some people as like, oh, all right, they just want to make problems or they want to make it worse. But they had to get it out. They had to get it out. You can't hold that type of pain and stress in your body, in your mind, and on your shoulders, right? You got to get it out. And so if it's not going to come out in a positive, creative form of self-expression, it's going to come out in a negative, destructive form. That's the laws of physics. That's it. That's the laws of physics. So, when I graduated in 97, 98, there was really, not a whole lot of options in terms of what you could do. Um, there was a mall being built. There was, um, again, the downtown was kind of left to, kind of a wild west, and, yeah, there are offices and, uh, what have you. And there was, like I said, cultural assets and, civic infrastructure and so on and so forth. But, this is the main corner of downtown right here in Salina and and Fayette. And when I mid '90s, nobody was really down here after dark. Nobody was living downtown. Um, you know, the offices were moving out to office parks. The big hotel was vacant. A lot of the huge office buildings were vacant. This old glorious canal era architecture was obviously still there. I mean, it's phenomenal. This is all right. This is all still there, but it was boarded up. You know, or barely used. Of course, all the trolleys and trains are gone and all that, but still, the search, I just did for '80s. I don't know what would get pulled up, but point being, I and my friends who, a lot of us came out of EPA, and were, very interested in sort of bridging that town gown divide. And when you live in Syracuse, I touched on Springfield where the Connecticut River cuts through. This is the big topic right now in Syracuse. This is Interstate 81, and it cuts up through instead of going around the city or, having some sort of beltway or something like that. Back in the 50s and 60s, they decided through urban renewal that they would just blast this thing right in here. So they tore down neighborhoods. They displaced a lot of people, the majority being African American working class people. A number of entire wards were raised for this highway system to come through, and then became look at all the parking. This is just moats of surface area, this gray. But a lot of this used to be neighborhood. Is the point? Is in the wake of this 81, these were tree-lined streets with row housing and homes and what have you right around the inner core of the downtown. And this barrier, which you can walk under, drive under, of course, it's an eyesore. It's toxic. It's loud. It's nonstop vehicular traffic, trucks, and so on and so forth. So you can see, the university is here on the hill, beautiful cemeteries and parks and stuff around it. So kind of again has its own, little city on the hill. You can kind of live up here. A lot of off-campus housing is, students and faculty and people related to the university are kind of this area. It's kind of becoming more of this area. But, my dorm was, where is it? These guys right here. So my freshman year, I'm sitting here and looking out the window, and the faculty in the RA and the people I'm starting to meet are telling us about the city, and they're saying, go to Marshall Street, which is over here, go to Westcott Street, which is over here. This down here is your big boxes and kind of like your strip mall-y stuff, and then if you want, you could pop over to the mall on the lake. And nobody was talking about, I guess, the elephant in the room at the time, again, 1991, 92, which was downtown. So if you know the story of the resurgence of Syracuse since then, again, this is the old historic district where the canal used to run through, the boats would float through, beautiful architecture, just absolutely phenomenal, canal era, turn of the century city. And so, like a lot of cities, the opportunity after sort of the white flight and all of the sort of disinvestment of downtown and people leaving, for the suburbs or other cities down south, Vegas, Atlanta, wherever they went, New York City. A lot of the vacancies that sort of blighted the downtown for a new wave of entrepreneurs, for restaurateurs, for little cafe operators, artists in particular, creators. Instead of it being your Brooklyn or your North Miami or your Oakland instead of San Francisco, it is the city itself. It wasn't an offshoot neighborhood, a periphery neighborhood. It was the core of downtown that we were doing work in and starting to probe and do more exhibits or live music, poetry nights, and stuff like that. So, really quick, just to sum up this video, I, upon graduating from Syracuse University, opened up my first art gallery right here, and this is on Marshall Street. There's a Starbucks and all that. This is a huge new development right now. But this is the traditional kind of off-campus mini downtown for university area activity. And the Jannus Gallery and Studio was opened in a subterranean space here in 1997. We had DJ dance parties, art gallery shows, had all kinds of little funky things going on. But it was a non-traditional space. We didn't charge really anything. We didn't have anything to sell. So after less than a year, it closed its doors, but it really was the seed that got planted for me in terms of what was possible here in Syracuse, because again, at the time, a lot of activity gowned-wise was kind of relegated to this area, and then being downtown was kind of ghost-like, and the suburbs were doing the suburb thing. So the shows that we were doing here at this location were actually bringing a mix of people from different areas, not just university. And the light bulb went off in the head that, there was more meat on the bone.